Today I'm going to be looking at Daisy Matthews and Three Other Tales, which is a collection of 4 short stories by Rhys Davies that were published by the Golden Cockerel Press in 1932. And this edition was limited to 325 copies. It featured in Chanticleer, the first of the Golden Cockerel Press's bibliographies, at entry number 87. And Chanticleer tells us that in this edition, Agnes Miller Parker introduces a new standard of delicacy into modern wood engravings. So I was pretty excited to get this and see what that holds in store. It was part of a series of editions by the Golden Cockerel Press that each sold for a price of 1 guinea and featured work by contemporary authors. And they all shared the same basic exterior design, which includes these boards covered in this printed material. Not 100% sure if this is cloth or paper. Certainly has a feeling of cloth about it. And that's printed with this design. It has the initials of the author, RD for Rhys Davies, and GCP for the Golden Cockerel Press. Annoyingly, in my copy, the D and C on the right have been cut off at the edge of the board. By way of comparison, I have here a German Idyll, which was another book in the same series. You see it has the same basic design, albeit with a slightly different colour scheme. Here we have H.E.B. for H.E. Bates, who wrote that book. But there are a number of books in that series. So we have Crotty Shinkerwin, The 100th Story of A.E. Coppard, When Thou Wast Naked, and several others. So we have this printed cover material, and if we refer to Chanticleer, we're told that this book is quarter bound in yellow Morocco leather. Now every copy I've seen has this sort of tan brown colour. I'm not entirely sure if that's because the dye used in the leather has discoloured over time, or whether this is just a particularly brown shade of yellow. But either way, we have this leather Morocco binding over these cloth or paper sides. If we look on the spine, we find that the volume is blocked with both the title and the author's name. That's printed in very small text, which allows it to be printed upright on this fairly narrow volume. Also, the top edge of the text block is gilded, although the bottom and fore edges are left untrimmed. So if we open the book up, we find that it is printed like many Golden Cockerel Press books of the era on this handmade paper, bachelor's handmade paper. I've said it before, this paper has a fairly coarse texture, which gives it a certain tactile quality. It's not the same as the sort of highly refined machine-made smooth paper that you might find in a modern edition, but that's probably not what you're looking for if you buy a book like this anyway. So a nice tactile quality to the paper. Then we have here the title page, so we see Daisy Matthews and Three Other Tales by Rhys Davies, and there are wood engravings by Agnes Miller Parker. This was printed and made in the Great Britain by the Golden Cockerel Press, who were based in Berkshire. And then we have a brief table of contents listing our 4 tales, along with the signature of our author, Rhys Davies. So, like the other editions in this series of 1 guinea books, this book is set in a typeface that was designed by Eric Gill specifically for the Golden Cockerel Press. They call it Golden Cockerel Type, and it's set in 14 point. So you could see it's a fairly plain typographic design, but not at all unpleasant typeface, and nice to see a bespoke typeface used in an edition like this. One feature of the typographic design that I didn't like that much is that there are neither indentations or some left white space to indicate the beginning of paragraphs, and certainly while reading that makes it a little bit harder to pick the start of a paragraph out, and I think it also makes the text look a little bit more crude when it sits on the page. So I'm not a big fan of that particular typographic design. And then if we open out to the start of our first story, Daisy Matthews, we see the general design layout that is used for each of the 4 stories. So they all start with this title piece illustration, which is by our illustrator Agnes Miller Parker. So if you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of Miller Parker's work in books like Down the River and Through the Woods. Those include wood engravings by Miller Parker that have this really soft pastoral quality that's quite unusual, but really I think quite effective. I didn't find the illustrations in this book to be quite so effective. They have a slightly more scratchy, fussy quality about them, but still nice enough. And one thing I like is that they really pick out key moments of the 4 stories that they illustrate. Then we have the title of the story set in display, which is inset here inside the illustration, and then we go right into the text of the story itself. So I can skip ahead and show you the title pieces for the other 3 stories. While I do that, maybe I can remark on the stories themselves. So they're fairly simple, short affairs. They have in common a theme of unrequited love and a sort of wistful sense, with a focus on the relationship between human beings and animals. So you'll see that animals also feature in these illustrations by Agnes Miller Parker. So they're stories with a simple charm, certainly not high literature. I think that could be said for any of these One Guinea Golden Cockerel Press books, but a fairly fun light read all the same. So we just saw the second of those title pieces. Skip ahead now to the third, The Sleeping Beauty, and then lastly the fourth is called Lovers. So that's a fairly simple look at this book from the Golden Cockerel Press by Rhys Davies, Daisy Matthews and 3 Other Tales. Overall, I think it's a fairly unremarkable book. I was drawn to it mostly because of those engravings by Agnes Miller Parker. They're not perhaps up to her usual lofty standard, but they were nice enough. And there's something about me, maybe something a bit compulsive, that tells me now that I have 2 of these, I'm going to have to collect the whole set. So I think that could get expensive. But that's what this hobby is all about. So I hope you enjoyed this quick look at Daisy Matthews and 3 Other Tales.